say, kids, what time is it?
Hey gang, Keith here from GeekTime TV, and as customary with a new year, I generally go through my computer and clean up the drive and make some space for things. And part of what I moved off of my older computer were podcasts, audio podcasts that we did about 2 years ago, early 2020. Preceding GeekTime TV, we had an audio podcast called Pizza and Pop Culture. And as I was moving the files, I got an idea that maybe it might be cool to maybe form a new segment called GeekTime Vault and take some of those old audio podcast segments that are kind of evergreen, throw some graphics on them, photographs and whatnot, and post them as videos. Because there's actually some good content that's going to be lost down the memory hole. So why not? I figured. So our first one I'm going to present here is we did a 3-part special series on the band Kiss, and we covered 3 different generations of their careers, starting in 1973. So, well, here it is. Here's our first one. Hope you enjoy.
You wanted us best, and you got the best! The hottest band in the world, Kiss!
Hello and welcome to this very special edition of Pizza and Pop Culture. We have a new topping here with us, Mr. Baron himself, Mike Savenelli.
Hello, hello.
And with me to my immediate left is the one and only George Alexopoulos, who, thank you once again to Eastside Pizza for letting us use this empty space next to your restaurant to record these wonderful shows.
No problem, man. Our pleasure.
And thank you to our audience. Our audience is growing. We are growing quickly, and I'm very excited about that. We did live streams last week to cover the San Diego Comic-Con debacle. It wasn't much of a Comic-Con, but our numbers went way up from that. So
Nice.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Nice.
So if you want to get aboard the bandwagon and hang with the cool kids, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Those addresses would be at Pizza Pop Culture, all one word. And, of course, you could find all those by going through our website at pizzapopculture.com. And if you would be so kind, whether you listen or not, please subscribe. We need the subs. The numbers go up. Things happen. Good things happen.
Yes.
Like we'll actually be able to afford soap for our shower if you subscribe. And before we kick this special edition off, which will be commercial-free for all you people out there, please listen to our friends at Pint of Comics, Ghosts of the Stratosphere, 430 Movie, Inglorious Trexperts, Best Movies Never Made, and Forgotten Cinema. All great shows. There's a ton of other ones, too, but we'd be here for an hour reading them all off. You can find them linked to us in our social media.
Great stuff.
So, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
So, guys, what brought us to this special edition is our combined love of the band Kiss. That's basically kind of how we all became friends with each other.
Of course.
So we thought, like, where do you start? Where do you finish? How do you hone it all in? And I thought maybe the best thing to do is cover it in eras. So maybe we should go back to the original band when they started. Primarily, what from each of you, what drew you to them, or when was the first time you heard them?
Well, I remember as a kid, my older brother, Angelo, and his friends, they're buying some Kiss stuff. I remember myself buying Gene Simmons' solo album. The proudest day of my life. I was 8 years old, I think, when I Was Made for Loving You was a huge hit, and we had our skateboards and the old school tape recorders that you use really to dictate on. I mean, you know, listening to music. That's what we did.
You mean like the Brady Bunch kind with the...
Yeah, you hit eject and
the
the
rectangle
comes out.
one? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, with the speaker.
Yeah.
So I remember I bought the I Was Made for Loving You. I bought Dynasty, the the cassette with my little tape recorder, and I was skateboarding next door in Mr. Morgan's driveway. He's been dead probably for 100 years now. But what originally drew me to Kiss was definitely Paul Stanley. Always has been, his voice and just his his style and all that. And yeah, I bought that cassette, and then I think I bought the his solo album in the cutout bin because they shipped so many of them that they couldn't sell at retail. I think it was Bradley's or King's down where I bought 99 cents 8-track.
Awesome.
The Paul Stanley solo album, 8-track. Put that in my father's Buick.
Painted a great picture there.
Yeah, with a Buick too.
There you go.
Nice.
So for me, it was a little earlier than you guys. It was 1976 for me. I was 7 years old. So sharp listeners will do the math quickly and figure out how old I am. So I actually went up to my friend Tommy Monahan's house to play, Soldiers or whatever we would do, and he put on Kiss Alive. And I was like, whoa, what's that? And when he showed me the cover, I was like, oh my God, it's like superheroes that play rock music. This is awesome. I have to have this. So I, would save my allowance money because, back when we were kids, we had to do chores and get allowance money, unlike the kids these days. And so I gave all my allowance money to my mom. She was going to the mall, and I said, buy me Kiss Alive. And she calls from the mall, and she says, they don't have any more Kiss Alives, but they have the new record. Do you want the new record? And I said, yeah. So she brought home Rock and Roll Over. And I was a little mad because I just wanted a picture of them. And all the artwork and everything that came with the album was the cartoon, the cover, which is a brilliant cover. But I said, you got to take this back because there's no pictures of them, and I don't want this. And she wouldn't do it. So, it worked out great because that to this day I think is top 3 Kiss album. It's one of my favorites.
I agree.
So that's how we got started. But, why don't we talk about how they got started? It's kind of a crazy story. And to me, it's inspirational to this day. These guys that just kind of knew that in their brain that we're going to make it, we're going to do this. And they persevered through some tough times. Yep. I mean, we've all read the books. And,
right.
Yeah.
What's something that comes to mind for you, Mike? That
I think just the the fact that they were panned so badly, and you make 3 albums, which I still like the original 3 albums and Alive, like that 4-album stretch is still my favorite Kiss period, even though it wasn't popular at the time, which is funny that the fact that those songs became so much popular after Alive, and then part of rock kind of embroidered it into rock, right, with stuff like Strutter and Deuce and stuff like that. But the album itself nobody cared about, and if they didn't put out Alive and it didn't have that energy and it didn't push that button at the time, those songs would probably never be known. So it is an interesting, I think, story that the Live album it was sink or swim, and they swam obviously great, and they were able to do whatever they wanted to after that because of that success. But it is a bummer that when you think about it, at that time you had 3 albums, and 2 of the 3 I think are great albums that nobody really wanted to hear until it was on recorded live.
They didn't like the way the album sound.
Right.
I mean, Kiss, the first album, Dressed to Kill, I'm not crazy about the way they sound. I like the way Hotter Than Hell sounds. I'm in the minority.
Do you?
There. Yeah. I know I'm in the minority there, but I really like the way that album sounds. I think it sounds better than the first one and the third one.
I mean, when I go to those 3 albums now, by far Hotter Than Hell is the one that I would pick to listen to.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I think, again, it's awesome all the way through. Yeah. And the production is different, but, like the other one sounds so thin.
Yeah.
And that one, the distortion is just, it's grating, which I like on purpose.
it's very, very raw.
Yeah.
It sounds like they recorded it in one session in a garage.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it work.
I even like the demos on that Kiss box set that came out. There's demos of Strutter, Deuce, and I think those are a lot better than the ones that are on the album.
Right? Yeah, no, I hear you. And Hotter Than Hell, it's interesting because you're right. I think initially it was considered the weakest of the 3. I think because it was so raw and it just sounded so cheap. But you look back on it now, and I think it is. I don't know. It's right there with the first album. The first album's got so many classics on it that it's tough to.
I agree with you. I think that in the beginning, in early fandom, it was always, for us, like the weakest link of those 3. But I think now it has the best songs on it, and the songs have, because they're not overplayed either, a lot of them, and they are really good songs. So I definitely reach for that album now because, again, I also think that it's a little more dark too.
Yeah. It's got a more Sabbathy feel to it. It's got that brooding, plodding pace.
So I definitely like I've called that for the last several years my favorite Kiss album, period. So and I think it still is now. So it's a great record, and I think again when we talk about the struggles that Yeah, those early years of, dressing up and all that stuff and lugging your own gear, and they had no real identity before the first album per se, but then after that, just trying to get legitimacy and the critics killing them and all that type of stuff, and to hang in there and make it after the live album. If that didn't happen, nothing would have happened.
Yeah. I think you just brought up a great point about putting on all the costumes and makeup and humping their own stuff around. And we've dressed up as Kiss in the past, and with the shoes and the whole bit, and that's tedious, man. Like, to do it for Halloween for one night, it's 2.5 hours to get made up, and you got to hump around all that stuff, and it's just, and we're not carrying instruments or anything. We're just walking around in the street, right?
And we didn't put on
these
a show.
guys, right? These guys were doing this day after day, year after year, until they made it big. And even to this day, they still put their own makeup on. They don't have makeup artists.
Well, that's the thing, and not to talk about today, but I think about that point all the time about today. I'm like, these guys are freaking 70 years old, and you're going on tour, and you're putting on makeup every night and these insane costumes, and then 2 hours of sweating your ass off. And at that age, I mean, Jesus, man, it's brutal. I have trouble enough just combing my hair in the morning to go to work. And these guys at that, I mean, obviously they really, really love it. And that's the thing that people don't, I think, understand about that. And I know we're going off topic, but that's the kind of stuff that people, I think, don't understand when we talk about aging entertainers, and we talk about the money, and with Paul and Gene, everybody will say the money. I'm like, it's not about the money. It's about the fact that they don't want to say it's over in their minds. I still want to be out there with people yelling my name and interested in hearing what I have to say and do. I don't think that they need the money. I think that they need that fed all the time. Like Paul McCartney's 76 years old, and why the hell is he still doing it? He doesn't need the money either.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, I think just turned 70, whatever. I mean, these guys, they don't do it for the money. They do it because they love to do it.
Right. When you have the need to be on stage, there's something that you need filled inside of you all the time. And I don't think either of them. Gene Simmons recently famously said that when they play their last show, he's going to cry like a schoolgirl who got stepped on at the prom.
Right.
And I believe that. I don't think he wants to let it go, but you got to face the facts at some point.
Right. And that's definitely what I think is going on with a lot of these artists that from our youth and before. Yeah, they're still out there doing it because they love. That's all they know, and they love to do it. A lot of them, they might not live a lot longer after that if they just stop.
Well, look at Ozzy. He's got Parkinson's, and he still plans on doing a farewell tour when he can.
Right, because he's got to do it.
Right. So back to the 70s and back to those first three albums. You mentioned that the production value on 2 of the 3 first albums was thin, and I actually just quick comment about the 80s albums. I think that was part of the problem with the 80s albums. The production was very thin. Bruce Kulick can shred, and that guy, if you listen to his solo stuff, it's just crunchy, and those albums are just...
It is a sign of the times, those records in the mid-'80s.
Yeah, Chasing Bon Jovi.
Chasing Poison and Bon Jovi. I mean, they weren't using Gibson guitars anymore. That's one of the things. I mean,
which
they
is
weren't
huge.
in.
Right.
What was in back then? Ibanez and
Jackson.
Yeah.
What was...
BC Rich?
What was George Lynch using? I forgot. George Lynch was ESP?
ESP.
Yeah.
I was going to say EPS, but ESP.
And of course, all I want to hear now is
pizza.
All I want to hear now is a Les Paul plugged directly in with no effects on it.
Right. Into a Marshall stack.
In 2020.
Yeah.
It just all comes obviously full circle when you look back at all that stuff.
No, it does.
I think though with the production with them, it's funny. I have a hard time finding a Kiss album that, wow, that production was awesome. I don't know if I ever felt...
I can think of one.
I mean, Creatures of the Night and
That's
Look It
the
Up.
one.
I feel I like the sound, but I know there's a lot of naysayers out there about that. When I read bulletin boards and stuff, there's a lot of people who piss and moan about the drum sound. Unfortunately,
because there was so much reverb and it was
it's what makes the whole thing a classic for me.
Me too. When you hear "I Love It Loud" without that, it's limpy. Yeah.
The best album I think production-wise might be "Rock and Roll Over" and "Love Gun" because of Eddie Kramer.
Eddie Kramer. So I was gonna get there.
I don't know. It's just perfect.
Simple, clean rock and roll.
I wonder why they didn't use him more often,
I know Ace loves using them.
Yeah.
So back to Alive, we famously know that they were living off Bill Aucoin's credit cards at that time. They were almost at the point where they were done.
Right.
And, there's also the debate that wasn't really a live album.
Right.
That it was a studio album from Eddie Kramer.
I mean, the more I've dug into, I've gotten into... we've known each other 40 years, something like that.
Yeah,
pretty close.
Yeah, and a ton of the classic live albums now has come out that there's a lot of touching up going on, and I don't feel bad about it with the live personally because I want it to sound pleasurable to my ears, if I'm going to play it and I'm paying for it.
Yeah.
If I want raw, I'll buy bootlegs, and that's great.
Yeah.
Alive 2, I think, took that too far from all accounts. But again, I think with Alive, you got, 4 23-year-old guys or whatever they were, you know what I mean? And shit happens, and the listener needs to have a good listening experience, not pointing out like deficiencies that are created that are unavoidable. you
Right.
know? So I have no problem with stuff being cleaned up a little bit here and there.
I
Yeah.
agree with you.
It's amazing how Kiss Alive sounds so much better than Kiss Alive 2. When you figure it might be should be the opposite.
Yeah, I always hated the drum sound on Kiss Alive too. They sound like garbage cans.
Even everything, the guitars, everything, it sounds so, I don't know, cheap.
Maybe they were trying to make it sound more raw because they got called out on the first one.
Maybe.
So coming out of Kiss Alive, they decided to do something completely different. They course correct. They go into the studio with Bob Ezrin, which apparently kicked off Ace's problems, or took Ace's problems from chronic beer drinking to a whole new level. But I think launched their greatest song ever, in my opinion, is Detroit Rock City.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Destroyer is very polarizing. I know. I think there's somewhat of a love-hate relationship there, I think, with the fans and that album. I think there's some people, and again, I spent a lot of time online all these years, reading people's opinions. It's amazing the opinions you read, which is awesome, though, because it's great that I love the fact that everybody has, Crazy Nights is my favorite Kiss album. I mean, I see stuff like that, and I'm like, hey, great, that's great, that's fun and good, that's good. I mean, I don't like the album, but good for you. But yeah, with Destroyer, I mean, I think, you go from the people who bought in to Alive being a raucous, raw, basic
rock and roll party.
Yeah, and now we're putting out an album with all kinds of orchestration all over it on multiple songs and all kinds of other stuff. And I think there's a lot of people who like Rock and Roll Over way better for that reason, and I understand that. I mean, with Destroyer, I think for me personally, it's like kind of middle of the roadish for me. Like I like a lot of the songs, a few of the songs I don't like, and I can kind of take or leave the whole production aspect. But I definitely I think Rock and Roll Over better than Destroyer for me.
I'm with you. I got Destroyer immediately after Rock and Roll Over. That was the next album I bought. And it's kind of funny, too. I remember I bought it at the Meriden Mall, and there was a Friendly's in there at the time. And I went with my mom to have lunch, and the waitress started giving my mom a ton of shit for letting me buy that album. How could you? Those are demons, and blah, 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 blah. The whole bit. So, but I was let down when I brought it home. I didn't really like the album.
Right.
I think the songs that have stood the test of time are the only good songs on the album. To be honest with you, you got the first 3 on side 1. Yes, there were sides back then, kids. Then you'd flip it over, and Flaming Youth, okay, whatever. It's a filler. Sweet Pain, it's a filler. Shout It Out Loud is a throwback, kind of a let's try to do it again. Beth, I can't stand. I'm sorry. I know I'm probably in the minority. I can't stand it. And Great Expectations. Do You Love Me is the only really classic track off the second side, I think.
I mean, the funny thing about Beth is you look back at that, and again, we go that that people at the time got into the band for Alive, and then Beth is the total opposite, and it just brought in all kinds of different fans now.
Yeah.
And you have one guy there who was limitedly talented, who made an entire career, no, seriously, off of just writing that melody with another person, and at the right exact time with the right producer and the right climate in the business for people to gravitate towards a song like that. So good for him. I mean that again, it made his whole life. And when you look at when you look at the dynamics of that for a second, it's bizarre to say you have a band of like ruffians before, maybe on some level looked at before Destroyer, right?
Yeah.
And you have Alive, which is scary, which isn't really the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's on the edge. It's edgy at the time.
Yeah.
And then the next album you put out in like how many months has a ballad with all orchestration singing about a woman, and you still were able to like make that work and continue the run. I mean, it's interesting. You know what I mean? It's interesting. That's all. We've
all read Kiss Behind the Mask by David Leaf and Ken Sharp, and it's funny when you read what producers and people were saying at the time about Peter Criss's abilities,
right?
And just how much trouble they had in the studio just getting him to keep time.
Right.
He really had problems with that, and the fact that Gene punched up Beth. I mean, he apparently brought a kind of a wreck of a song named Beck,
right?
Who he was just making fun of a dude in his band, his previous band, and Gene polished it all up and gave this guy a mega hit, and still wasn't good enough.
Well, it definitely propelled them to the next level. God knows. So so you can't take that from him, and you can't, and I look back and when we were kids, it was a much different perspective on everything, and I appreciate Peter Criss and his drumming a jillion times more now than I did when I was 18 years old, 30 years later. And I do think that Peter, I love his drumming on the first 3 albums now.
Yeah.
And then after that, I don't know, drugs, alcohol, whatever it was, I don't know, or just the change in the style of the music they were playing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to the songs closely, obviously, and the drumming on the songs on like Love Gun or Rock and Roll Over versus like the first album, it's different.
Yeah.
It's just different. The approach, the writing, the whole vibe is different. And he was just, after, I think, the first incarnation, the first 3, he was kind of just, there's no memorable drum parts on the second 3 albums in my mind, technically, really. Yeah. Where in the first 3, oftentimes in albums, like you like pick things here and there that are fun, but then it just became like no fun. The drumming wasn't a lot of, it was just
standard.
Yeah, just keeping time, and that's it. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of excitement there, where in the beginning, I thought his drumming was fun, and I love listening to it still now.
I can think of 2 off the second 3 albums. It's the intro to Love Gun and the Making Love. He goes around the toms there, does the
right, and Detroit Rock City too on the breaks in Detroit Rock City. Yeah, all that stuff is, but
the drumming in Love Her All I Can is
right. That's different, right? It's just what I'm saying. Like that is more like feel. I think like we're coming up with it together as a band. Where the next 3 albums, it was more kind of formulated.
The producers were more in charge.
Yeah. And so then his style was kind of lost there, I thought, and then it never came back. And then personal stuff, I don't know enough about it, but
his background was in jazz anyway,
right.
So he kind of had that funk to him, and I think he brought a lot of that to the first 3 albums.
Right.
But then, like you said, it just became formulated. And I think he was already having trouble internally by 1976. That's my guess. I mean, you get different books telling you different stories about that.
I think I remember Peter saying once he's more of a Rolling Stones guy, and the rest of the guys are more Led Zeppelin guys.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
It really does make sense.
And, those first 3 albums were very street, too. I mean, they were, like, in it together.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. It was like they were out to change the world, so they were bonded by that cause, the 3 of them. Once the money came into it, everything started changing. I mean, you hear the stories about Ace not even recording half a Destroyer because he was blottoed. But he'd be out in the lounge in the studio, and Bob Kulick would walk out, and he's like, "How was I today?"
It's funny when you look back at how quickly that stuff happened, like overnight. Like since then, the last 20 or 30 years, stuff doesn't move that quickly. I mean, they put out a ton of albums in no time, and within no time, it accelerated the whole trajectory and the relationships with each other. I think where, you're a couple years into it, and people are already leaving or want to quit, and they're already doing drugs and booze, they can't handle it, or already we just got going. I mean, now there's several years between every freaking song that comes out, right? I mean, where then it was just a whole different thing.
The first album came out early '74. Right. Destroyer's coming out when in '76. That's 2 years later.
I mean, 2 years is nothing now.
We've talked about it where, I mean, they put out, I think every 6 months they were putting out an album.
Right.
And the idea, Neil Bogart wanted them to do that because he wanted to keep fresh content on the shelves to keep them relevant.
Yeah.
And I guess because they weren't selling very well in the beginning, people would take their inventory and send it back to Casablanca Records. Ooh. And so to keep the stores holding that back stock, he'd put a new album out. So maybe a customer would buy the new album and go, "Oh, look, they have the old ones here. I'm going to buy them all," which was a smart idea in when you think about it. Don't forget Casablanca Records. We didn't even talk about that. They were a brand new company, and Kiss was the first act they ever signed. They took a flyer on Circus Freaks,
The drama associated with that is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. It's a totally different world than what we know now, and that's what I'm saying about, again, how quickly it evolved, right? Yeah. And not just with this band. I'm talking about everything at the time.
Yeah.
Versus now, it's a whole different thing, even though technology speeds up stuff so much now, but just the process, I think, then it just was so much different. I don't know. You just look at it. People are adults faster, held to a standard faster. Everything moves quicker. There's seemed like less stuff to cut through.
I think back then, now it's a digital wasteland that you can make your own thing and self-distribute. Back then, like when you got chosen, you were one of the few. And they just wanted to exploit it as fast as they could. With a band like Kiss, nobody's seen anything like that before. The closest thing was Alice Cooper or the New York Dolls, right?
Yeah.
So here comes Kiss with their circus show and the heavy rock and roll, and Bill Aucoin was a genius about thinking about all the marketing potential that could come from just from the way they look. And then you saw it start to happen in the mid to late 70s. All of a sudden, there's lunch boxes and comic books and puzzles and games and action figures and the whole bit. Right.
Yeah, it again, we talk about the speed of that, right? Like what George just said a minute ago. First album came out in February of 74. 5 years later, by 79, it was a complete...
They were done.
It was for kids now. It was for 6-year-olds.
Right.
When, I mean, you're talking about 5 years earlier. 5 years is nothing in our lives now at this age. It goes so quick. So when you think about all that happened in that short amount of period, and again, how everything changed so dramatically, it's crazy to think about that, because it doesn't work like that now, and it really hasn't, I don't think, since the 70s, things...
No.
You know, that same process of just things evolving at a rapid... high-speed pace.
Kiss spoiled me so much. When you look at that 5-year span, they put out 6 studio albums, 2 double live albums, a double platinum greatest hits collection, and 4 solo albums.
It's crazy.
Well, if you count Dynasty.
And then Dynasty, if you want to count Dynasty as a 7th studio album. They spoiled me. As a kid, I mean, you're right, 3 years listening to Kiss, and I had a pile of albums. And then you get into somebody like Van Halen, they put out an album every 2 or 3 years. You're like, these guys are lazy, right? But Kiss spoiled us because they would just crank it. And there was really, when you think about those 6 albums, there wasn't much of a decrease in quality. It wasn't like there was an album full of shit put out. You know what I mean? They all had good stuff on them. To be cranking that out while you're touring, so you're writing on the road,
right.
You're recording demos in between shows. Like, those guys, they probably never slept.
Paul and Gene are notorious workaholics.
Yeah.
They don't want to stop.
Well, and again, back to the book,
You
and
admire that.
I highly recommend the book Behind the Mask, the official authorized biography of Kiss. It's they talk about, the producers and stuff talk about how Gene and Paul were pros from day one. Like, they were focused. They even worked on getting better, while the other guys, once they got some money, decided they were going to be rock and roll people.
Right.
They were just going to be destructive and.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt that Paul and Gene always had a more of a real business sense and a bigger purpose. You know, where the other guys loved the lifestyle and rock music and having a good time and didn't worry about much about what was going to happen next year or next week. And Paul and Gene did, and obviously that caused that schism there. But it would never be the way it was without those guys either. So forget it. I mean, everything about the original band is needed all the time. And if one of those guys, if Ace or Peter wasn't there, it wouldn't be the same at all. And I love the fact that it was them, even though it didn't.
At that time, it's who they needed to be.
Yeah. I mean, it made a tremendous difference. If you have a band of 4 Gene Simmonses and Paul Stanleys, you're probably not going to make it, because those guys are not.
They're all type A's. And, right.
And they're too maybe corporate or whatever, or not enough rock and roll. That we're not drinking, we're not smoking, we're not having good times. We're just it's a bit more of a business kind of mentality.
Right.
So you need that, especially in the 70s. I mean, it was all about that then, I think, was having a good time, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So you needed those guys in the band. And what they brought stylistically, again, both of them, forget it.
Frehley's a genius.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is.
I mean, just the whole thing, the both of them, the sound, they're a huge part of the sound. And without them, there wouldn't be a sound.
Well, I mean, look at it now. They're on their farewell tour, and 90% of the songs they play are off the first 6 albums. Right. So they were never able to quite get to that level again.
Right.
There was magic there, and it was sad to see it go so fast. I remember picking up People magazine in 1979, and there's a different guy with Ace, Paul, and Gene, and I'm like, what? Where's Peter? He quit? Then I quit. I quit Kiss. I'm like, screw this. They're not the same.
Yeah.
Turns out the guy they replaced him with was a mega talent, but 10-year-old me didn't want to hear that.
Right.
So, and it's funny you mentioned the non-drinking, non-smoking thing with Gene and Paul, and I remember as a kid they were in every freaking magazine on the planet, Cream and all these teen magazines, and I'd buy anything if I saw them on the cover. I'd buy it. And I remember we used to go camping a lot, and I would always bring the magazines and read them, and all the adults would tease me, oh, God, look at those idiots. And I'd go, Gene Simmons speaks 5 languages, and he was a school teacher. And, Paul Stanley worked as a cab driver, and neither of them smoke or drank. And, oh, give me a break. That's bull crap. They're rock and roll. Blah, 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 blah. The two things that came out of that are, one, those two guys kind of set a template for my life, because I looked at them, they were my heroes, and I said, if I act like that, if I kind of follow those rules, I'll be successful too.
Yeah.
Especially when you see Ace and Peter wash out. The second thing that came out of that was all those adults who told me they were a fad and they'd be gone are eating so much shit now, because I went to see them 4 times already on this last tour.
Right.
They're still here.
Still here. Yeah.
So, you know, the late 70s, the train goes off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we all know the story of, you know, like you said before, you know, Ace not playing the solo on, which song was it on Destroyer?
Sweet Pain.
Was it Sweet Pain?
They replaced him on Sweet. They didn't like what he did on Sweet
Yeah, it was
Pain.
Dick Wagner, right?
Yeah.
From Alice Cooper.
Right. Dick Wagner came in. Yep.
Yeah, and all the nerds out there that listen to this are going to be, you know, killing me for struggling to come up with this stuff.
Hey, we're winging it. We're not like, using research at all.
You know, I got nothing in front of me. But, you know, the solo albums definitely was the beginning of the end. They thought that, you know, Gene and Paul thought that it would help keep them together, and it wasn't going to keep anybody together. You know, well, from what my understanding of it is that, you know, those guys wanted to do that. You know, obviously Ace wanted to do it after Shock Me's success, and Peter wants to do it after Beth's success, and they want to make more money, and I get all that. And it sounded like Paul and Gene and management were like, great, let's all just go do it, and then we'll come back and start again. And it just wasn't going to happen. Those guys were, you know, they were gone, you know, upstairs on some level or another, thinking that, you know, they didn't need the other guys, even though, you know, the other guys are really the one. Well, I shouldn't say that, though, because, again, we talk about Beth, it's their biggest hit, and, you know, Peter's name's on it, so.
I thought it was more to do with just Peter just being
Disgruntled.
Just disgruntled. I heard he would like speed up songs when they were playing live, or he'd throw drumsticks at the other guys when they were playing live.
Yeah.
I always thought Peter quit, but I thought now is that Peter was fired.
I think he was fired. He was a malcontent.
I mean, you look at Peter, and I hate to say it, but he's not a super likable guy on top of everything else. So you see that there, and God knows what that chemistry was like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it must have been a lot of fun, and that's why reading the books and stuff is always
It's interesting.
There's so much drama behind it, you know.
And you know how much of the books are accurate. And,
Well, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
You go back in all the stories that when we were kids and we were into music and you know, at the time, and into this band and all the stuff that, you know, they would be quoted, stuff that we would read and believe, and then now decades later, like the real truth of that incident is in print somewhere, and everything you were fed by one of them is bullshit.
It was all corporate marketing jargon. It was bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, I recently saw a thing with Paul Stanley where, you know, they were asking him again if they're going to bring these guys back at some point on this farewell. And he said, you know, the door's always open and we're not going to rule it out. And he said, you know, the thing is, the band we have right now, we actually enjoy being around each other. And he's like, you know, sometimes you bring those guys back, it's great for the crowd, but we have to live with the nonsense that comes with it. And it's a lot to deal with day to day.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then you got Ace saying, well, now I'm the guy they always wanted me to be. Why won't they call me? You know?
Well, yeah, it's a little late, unfortunately.
40 years late.
You know?
Well, because they like the way things are now, and how can you blame them? You know, things are running smoothly now, you know?
You can tell just watching them, and again, we'll get to the new version down the road, but you can just tell when you go see them now that they love each other as human beings. The 4 of them really like being with each other, and they're super tight as a result of it.
Right.
You know, you've seen the show. It's amazing. I didn't expect it to be that good because of their age, but they hang it all out there, man.
Well, that's why when we talk about the other guys, I don't think, you know, Peter would be able to do anything now. I mean, nothing besides the fact that he's that age that he is.
He's
Right.
late 70s.
And that it's uber rigorous to do what he has to do. Why Neil Peart stopped playing and then unfortunately died of cancer that we didn't even know he had. But, you know, he blamed it on every joint and you know, knee and ankle and elbow. I've been playing, you know, whatever, you know, 150 shows a year at least for 40 years.
Right.
You know, your body's just done. I mean, Peter's never going to be able to do it. I mean, I really feel that these guys are like, I mean, this is it, man. I mean, the fact that Gene Simmons is still doing it is insane to me, because Gene isn't a workoutaholic kind of guy.
Yeah, he's not very athletic.
Yeah, and he's the one that's wearing all the stuff, and I think is closest to his original form than anybody else, you know, from the original band.
Yeah.
So, and he's what now?
70.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
I was actually at his birthday show last year.
Yeah, it's
70th
great.
birthday show.
I give him tons of credit.
I do too.
I really
do
do.
too. The guy's a machine. But, you know, he's still having fun. You can tell. He just has a ball doing it.
He loves it.
Yeah.
So back to the solo albums. I want to get your impression on these, or rank them, or what have you. So, what was the first one you bought, Mike, and what was your impression of it?
Well, I mentioned earlier on, I bought Paul's on 8-track, which is hilarious.
Right.
And I didn't even have an 8-track player. My parents did. Like, at that time, I don't think I even had a way to play music. Yeah. So it was on their 8-track in our family room when maybe they weren't there, or in their car when they let me. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't really hear much of the solo albums after that, because for me it was just always about Paul. Like, that was my thing. And even when I got Dynasty, it was the Paul songs. Even though I did listen to the rest of the tape regularly, because you listen to a tape, you can't just skip through on CD or like you do now with streaming. So you had to, which is great.
With the 8-track, it would break songs in half.
Right. So I never honestly really heard the rest of them that much till later. And I got, and I like Aces a lot, and I got into Aces, in the early 80s. And I got to be honest with you, the other two, it's just not, there's so much other stuff to listen to that I don't think it that really makes the grade for my listening time, so.
Right. What about you, George?
The first one I listened to was of course Gene's, because he was my favorite, because he's the demon.
Yeah.
And I remember the beginning of Radioactive used to scare me so much as a kid that I used to push the needle on the record across until the song started, because I didn't want to hear that satanic stuff. I did it so much and so often, then I would put it on the needle. It would go straight to the beginning of the song. It would pass over it because it was so
scratched the groove in the.
I scratched it so much.
It's funny that you say that, because I have a similar feeling about Alive 2, and I was still young, and I didn't have a very liberal upbringing, so everything was, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I got Alive 2 when you open up the gate. Oh no, it was the back, right, where Gene has that.
The blood all over his
Is it
face.
the back or the bottom or the front?
The blood's gushing out of his mouth.
Yeah, and so I buy that Merle's record rack down in Route 5 by Kmart.
Yeah.
I buy the double gatefold.
Yeah.
I come home and I put it on, and as soon as you got the "You Wanted the Best," and the way he did it then, the way they announced it then, was for my age evil. And then I'm looking at a picture of a guy with, and it did scare the shit out of me originally. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and for a little kid in like whatever grade I was in. Yeah.
Look at 7 years old.
Yeah.
7.
So after the Gene Simmons album, what happened?
I remember really liking that album a lot. I mean, not a lot. The second side in particular, like songs, Mr. Make Believe, Man of a Thousand Faces. I know it's not popular with a lot of people, but, I liked Radioactive, Living in Sin.
See You Tonight is great.
See You Tonight. And actually, the only reason I like it is because of the Unplugged. That was a great version of that song. And actually, you can kind of get the vibe of those songs, how The Elder is a little bit to me. His songwriting is very, like Only You and like Under the Rose sound like they could have been on his solo album.
Right. Yeah.
A little bit.
Same kind of theme, definitely.
Just the vibe of those
feel,
songs.
the
They don't sound like
orchestration
Loving Him, Leave Him, and Calling Dr. Love and those songs.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
For me, I got Aces first.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. And because Ace and Gene were my favorites, and I think I wanted Gene's, but it was sold out. So I got Aces. It was a gift. Loved Aces. Then I took my money and I went and bought Peter Criss's. But actually, I got Gene's second. Was disappointed in Gene's compared to Aces. When you get Aces first, it's all downhill from there. So then I went and got Peter Criss's, and I remember I got it, and it was Easter weekend. And my aunt and uncle were over, and I went in my room to listen to it, and I came out crying. and my uncle Steve says, "Whoa, what's the matter?" I said, "My Peter Criss record." He's like, "Oh, is it scratched? Is it skipping?" I said, "No, it's terrible." It was like a Barry Manilow album or something. I hated it. I have new appreciation for it for what it is. I still won't listen to it, but I get it now.
I think I might have listened to it once, and.
You expect the drummer from Kiss to put out a rock and roll album, not a.
Right. But that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. So it was clear, what he was into and what his
Musical
influences
taste was,
were.
yeah.
Even though he was living like we were talking about a rock and roll lifestyle, because he liked to, I think drink and carouse and do all that kind of tough guy Brooklyn stuff where he's from and his background. And I don't think that, from my understanding of it, and again, I'm no expert in anything we're talking about, but I don't think Peter doesn't look like the greatest, background and upbringing. So you're shoving a guy into this thing all of a sudden, and I think he had a hard time probably handling what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know?
Much like young athletes when they
Yeah.
get all this money. Yeah.
Yeah. Where I think Paul and Gene were more.
They were
Again.
focused from the beginning. They knew
Yeah.
exactly what they wanted.
They were
to
more
do.
well adjusted. You know, they were more, you know, logical and business types. Where you know, again, we said the other guys were just more.
Well, when
know,
you go
creatives.
back to they got together, they were in Wicked Lester together, and clearly the two of them said, "We got to do better than this," and they left and formed their own thing. And it was those two guys at the core. Ace and Peter joined after the fact, and yeah, Ace and Peter were aboard with what Gene and Paul wanted to do, but it was always what Gene and Paul wanted to do.
Exactly.
So, and that rippled through, and I think by the time we got to the solo albums, it was clear.
Yeah.
Even though Ace said he argued a lot on a lot of stuff that they were going in the wrong direction and we should stay rock and roll. You know.
Oh, with the Elder.
Well, between Dynasty and the Elder, I know he was really digging his heels in, and he had every right to. His solo album was so much better than his solo album is just pure rock and roll.
Well, what's so funny about it? I mean, the irony is that, you know, Ace is proven correct. That now these guys come back a few years later with the heaviest album they've ever done, and now he's like, I'm already done with you guys. I mean, it's like, you know, they determined themselves that, you know, they were chasing maybe trends and money, and we got to go back and just be a heavy band again and be heavier than ever. And the, you know, again, the irony of it, and that guy's out of the band, the guy that was telling them to it all along.
Right. So they come out of the solo albums, reunite, and I'm using air quotes for those of you at home, because as we know, Peter didn't play on the next two albums, even though he was on the covers, and did the tours. But
Anton Fig.
right, they brought in Anton, but they go like to pacify Peter. They hire his producer, Vinny Poncia,
Right.
to come in and produce Dynasty and then subsequently Unmasked.
So that's the reason why.
I'm pretty sure that they
Why it's
to keep Peter happy, to get him to come back. We'll use your producer, Peter. You know, we'll make.
It's so funny when you look at it. It's so odd, right?
Right.
The guy who has the least influence, and he's on his way out of the band, and now we're gonna have him.
And they're bending a knee to
and
him.
the solo album that he put out was by far the worst that nobody that I know even likes. And now you can use that producer to produce your next two Kiss albums. I mean, the decisions they were making were pretty questionable.
It's like,
What was Paul's quote about Peter's album in that book, Behind the Mask?
I think he said, like, this proves why things were going wrong in the band. This
Yeah,
album.
something like that. This is
Something like-
the epitome of what.
Yeah, it makes sense though
Yeah.
that he's saying that. Yeah.
And Gene said something like, "I don't know what the hell was going on with that thing." Like, so they end up doing like what many consider Kisco, a disco album, with Dynasty. I have mixed feelings about Dynasty. I hated it at first, liked it. No, I don't really like it again. I don't know. I go back and forth on it. It's definitely a sign of chasing trends.
Yeah. I don't. For me, I like a lot of the songs. I mean, Ace and Paul are the stars of the album, like they were with the solo albums. So, and that was right before then. So it showed, I think, that again, you know, those guys were writing the strongest on the two solo albums, and then on Dynasty. You know, I think the two Gene songs are almost worthless. And the Peter song obviously is not for me, really. But I do like, you know, the three Paul songs. I think are all great. And I know I Was Made for Loving You is very controversial, but I like the song. I mean, I do, and it is what it is. So, and you know, the Ace songs I think are, you know, he finally was getting his time on an album. You know.
Yeah.
I'd say I watched the footage recently of Gene playing live. I don't know when this concert was, within the last 5 years, and he was playing Charisma. And I was really getting into it.
Was that his Vault tour or something?
Yeah.
It was Gene's tour.
Yeah.
Gene's,
His Vault tour?
Yeah, his Vault tour, yeah. Like his whole band was up there,
Yeah.
and they're playing. He's forgetting all the lyrics, but, you know.
He does that now.
His,
He does that with everything.
I almost feel like that song could have been a lot better if the lyrics weren't so.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last show I saw with the last in New Hampshire back in February, he was butchering Shout It Out Loud, and I was so close. I was 12 or 15 rows on the floor, and I could see him rolling his eyes and going, "Oh, whoops," you know. And Paul was like kind of looking at him like, "Dude, you think you're singing this song all backwards?"
You know, it seems like lately I go on Facebook and I'm seeing so many covers of Sure Know Something.
Really?
I just saw one with some band, they're covering it, and then I just saw another one with this guy with an acoustic guitar and a girl who's like maybe somewhere between 20 and 16 years old, and she's singing it, and for the solo she starts playing a violin, and I'm like,
I think you
where the
sent me
heck
that.
is this all coming from? This is amazing. Especially the cover with the band playing it it's amazing. It almost sounds like a a Hall & Oates song, but
Right.
but it's a great Kiss song.
Oh, it's a great song.
Great Kiss song.
So yeah, I liked Hard Times from Ace. I think that was Ace's best song on that album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
it was a biography song, you know.
Yeah.
I agree. Definitely the best song of his on the album. But yeah.
Overall, I think the best song on the album is Sure Know Something.
Magic Touch is great.
Magic Touch is a great song too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Underrated.
Yeah.
But you're right. The album's very symptomatic. You could almost take each person's contribution and put it on their solo album, and it would fit in perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really was like an extension, I think, of that. God knows how many of the songs were leftovers from that, from those albums. And there's only 9 songs on Dynasty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's probably, 32 minutes long? I mean, or something like that. So, I mean, it's not the greatest of efforts per se, but,
Really?
but the lead single in the first song is a huge freaking song in the history of music, period, and a huge song for the band. So that's all that
Their
matters.
Biggest hit since Beth.
Yeah.
And probably their biggest hit since, right?
Right.
Or did Forever
Maybe
top it?
Forever might have, but still, I mean, it's still huge, and you can't deny it. And like I said, yeah, I don't care. I still love the song, all the disco stuff, whatever. I mean, I still enjoy the song myself. I love the guitar solo on that song.
Yeah.
That's a
So-
great. They did an interview on their tour recently in overseas somewhere, and Paul Stanley was talking about they were playing some festival with all these really metal bands, and all the people in the audience had face piercings and whatnot, and face tattoos, and he's like, and they're all hardcore metal, and he goes, and we get up there to play, and he goes, all of a sudden we bust out "I Was Made for Loving You," and he goes, there's nothing better than seeing those people going doo doo doo. He's like, it's so surreal to see that.
Jeez.
So this song does transcend, we'll love it or hate it. It does transcend all fans. So then they follow it up with, I don't hate the album, but it was landed with a thud. Unmasked.
I mean,
Dynasty. I think Dynasty. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Dynasty pre-shipped with 1 million sold, right?
yeah, Dynasty was a platinum
Just
album.
like it shipped platinum, just like the solo albums did. So it didn't matter if it sold another copy; it was already platinum.
Right.
Unmasked, not so much.
I mean, Unmasked, man. I mean, again, I don't like the album overall personally. I know many people, I'm sure, don't. I mean, it's such a corporate paint by numbers. The
Like
song,
a Journey album.
Yeah, the songs all sound like somebody else wrote them for them, and they
Yeah.
brought them in almost like Heart in the mid '80s or something.
Yeah.
it doesn't even sound like them at all. I mean, with at least every other album, as bad as they could be or not, I can connect with it. But that album, I don't know, man. It just sounds like a bunch of the same type of formula. What's the right word? Formulaic. Is that right?
Yeah, it's
Songs.
formulaic.
And I don't think there's really standout songs or a hit. That's the thing. There's no hit song, and that was a problem.
I would say Shandy or Naked City are the only two.
Yeah, I mean, nobody outside of us knows those songs. So I mean, it's basically just Kissaholics who know those songs. I mean,
Right.
Shandy in Australia, and that's it.
Right.
I think Dynasty sounds like a better album. The sound is better. If that sound carried over to Unmasked, Unmasked could sound better. If it just sounded a
I think
little less pop.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. Right?
Unmasked
Almost
is-
like a
So
rock
it's
album.
like if you take that away, I think Easy as It Seems is a great song. I think You're All That I Want is very good.
Is That You is not bad. But you're right, it's over polished, it's overproduced.
Talk to Me is great. Actually, I'm one of the few people who likes Torpedo Girl.
I mean, there are obviously some good songs on the album, but I mean, if you look at the album, if you pared it down to less songs and made the good songs better and didn't produce it like it was produced, and to your point, we're Monday morning quarterbacking here. This is what everything sounded like then, and I don't
Exactly.
blame anybody for anything that happened or didn't happen, and whatever it is. What
You're
it is,
right.
So,
But I do think, too, that the sales not so much reflected the content of the album, but it was also a response to Dynasty. Dynasty shipped platinum, but I think when people played it, they were like, this is not Kiss.
that's a good point. It was like, I'm not going to buy the next album now.
Right. Then the next album comes out. It's produced by the same guy.
And that crappy cover, man, in my opinion,
The
Maybe-
cover was
didn't
terrible.
help anything either.
Maybe
No.
because I Was Made for Love You was so popular. Maybe they thought, let's see if we can ride this again.
Oh yeah, that's definitely what was going on, no doubt.
Yeah.
Because
And
if Is That You was that, I mean, why did Paul singing a cover? That's so odd. I still don't understand that.
Yeah.
Open up a Kiss album, a cover, and Paul singing it. It's like,
yeah, the opening track. you
that's
mean? Yeah.
strange to me.
The whole thing is strange. The whole album is strange, right? Which is why, again, it ended up just being like a die-hard album. It's not for like the casual rock fan. It's for people who are, crazy about the band itself.
Right. And fans were getting mixed signals at the time because within that same time frame, the album drops, and then right in that same area that summer, the People magazine with their car drops.
Yeah.
And now, there was no internet back then, so it was very hard to keep up on Kiss news.
Yeah.
You waited for a magazine to hit the rack.
Right.
And when, again, I saw that, I'm like, oh, really? Double fuck you. I already was done with Dynasty, and now this happens, double fuck you.
And we could talk about it. We could talk about it more in the next, like you're saying, next time. But the comeback story is so underrated, in my opinion.
I'm with you.
So underrated. The fact that
I'm actually excited to do the non-makeup years more.
Yeah, I mean the fact that they were able to come back and sell platinum, and now again, they weren't a top act in the '80s. I lie to myself that they were, but they really weren't. They were still popular enough, and during different times more popular than others. But the fact they were able to sustain a career after sabotage, after self-sabotage, after 1,000 times in a row, you're talking with the solo albums with, it not being great, right? And then you talk about Dynasty with the controversy there, and Unmasked, more controversy, and The Elder, even more controversy. In the middle of it, the drummer leaves, a different drummer, and then you make it still back after you put out 3 albums in a row that were just,
Face plants.
Yeah, I mean, and change an original member who sang in the band, and to be able to stay alive is the greatest achievement, in my opinion, that the band ever pulled off. And again, it goes directly to Paul, in my opinion, because he was the only one checked in at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he Gene has a career still, in my opinion, probably because of Paul. And I know that people that just heard that are probably going to be like, hey, piss off. But after Lick It Up to Revenge, Gene was non-existent.
He was trying to be an actor.
Yeah, and all the hit songs were Paul songs, and because Paul was still writing hit songs. And so if Paul said, I don't want to write hit songs anymore, that would have been the end of it.
I think if there's one thing that's obvious is that Paul's always had his thumb on the pulse of pop culture.
Right.
And what's trending and what's not. And that's why you saw the band evolve time and time again. I think if it were, Gene is brilliant in some ways as a marketing person. He loves to put his face and their logo on anything. But I don't think he's quick enough to recognize shifts in trends. And he would have kept doing the same thing until he was obsolete. I think Paul's the one who's constantly looking at taking the temperature of culture and making those adjustments.
I would say that at heart, Paul loves rock and roll. I'm not saying that Gene doesn't or the other guys don't, but he wants to be a rock star. He wants to be upstage. He loves it. He lives and breathes it. That's why,
I agree, and I think that's, again, why we said before they're still doing this now. Because he just loves to do it. So, who's gonna tell you stop doing what you love? And do it. If people come, they come. I mean, whatever.
And Gene just veered because he wanted to be a movie star.
Well, the makeup came off, so now I can do other things.
Right.
Remember, I couldn't do before.
That's a great point. We haven't brought up yet. Is remember now for 8 years.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what they looked like.
Yeah.
I mean, very few people. I mean, there was that famous Cream magazine dupe job where they said, "Hey, your manager said one picture with your makeup off," and they snapped the picture. But I remember as a kid, like that made them larger than life superheroes because nobody knew what they really looked like. And I remember I used to sit there, like even with the solo albums, and I'd put paper over the cover and trace it and just draw their facial features without the makeup and see if that's what they, that's what Ace really looks like. Cause it was a mystery, and that was part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
The makeup's back on now, but they wash it off and we know what they look like. So
yeah.
It was different back then, and that's part of the lore that we completely skipped over. And that's what also that made them.
Well, no doubt. Like when you go back to, like I said about Alive 2 before, with the blood and the intro, and on top of that, these guys that at that time, and it sounds silly now, of course, but then there's a whole different planet. I mean, it isn't even the same universe that we're living in that we were then, right?
Yeah.
So, you combine all that stuff together, the hiding of the identities, who really are, is there really something evil going on? It's stupid to say it now, but I mean, anything then, and anything now. I mean, society can pump up anything in any way. So all that stuff, and to Keith's point before, you just read newspapers and magazines and the news. You're not digging into other people's opinions and getting the truth behind the story like you do now. I mean, you just get the story they want to give you.
Right.
Then.
And let's also, not discredit the fact that they created the arena rock show as we know it. I mean, forget the arena rock show. You have like pop artists that do what Kiss does now. People go see Kiss now, younger people, and they go, yeah, big deal.
Right.
Because Lady Gaga blows shit up now too, right? So, but back in the 70s, nobody did what they did. Most bands, Steely Dan or whoever, they go out in their jeans and play, and there was nothing wrong with that. But Kiss wanted to bring a whole show to the concert experience, and everybody copied them from that point forward.
Yeah.
So now we're at The Elder, 1981. Eric Carr joins the band, and you know, I love The Elder, but the poor guy, right? He joins Kiss, and then they're in free fall, and they decide to do this weird concept album with Bob Ezrin,
Yeah.
who apparently was at the height of his drug addiction at the time, and says that he wishes he rethought some of it. But the older I get, the more I love that album. And I remember when I was a kid, and that was another one. I remember walking through a music store in 1981, and I saw that cover with the hand on it.
You remember that, really?
Yeah, and I remember flipping it over and looked at the songs and put it back down. I said, God, that's a shame. They're so dead. Kiss is so dead. And it made me sad.
After the Unmasked cover, then you put out that cover next.
Right. And it was just like, in reading, you know, music from The Elder, and I was just like, oh, God, these guys are toast. And it made me sad, but I was into other stuff at that time.
When that album came out, I have no recollection of hearing anything of Kiss.
No, me either.
I think I remember Kiss Alive 2, then the next thing I know was I Love It Loud. I don't remember anything in between.
I same experience for me. I mean, George, we were 10 years old.
Yeah.
You know, if it wasn't on the radio or whatever, you didn't know. So when Unmasked and The Elder had no staying power or no anything, I didn't even know they were out there, honestly.
Yeah.
And I didn't. Maybe I might have saw the Unmasked, like we're saying, the cover here and there when I'm out with my parents.
Yeah. Right.
But I wasn't interested because it didn't really interest me seeing that cover. And that's the thing about Dynasty, by the way, is the cover is awesome, I think.
Yeah.
And that also attracted people to buy the record just to have that cover.
Yeah.
But to your point, yeah, I had my Dynasty cassette, and then I didn't hear Kiss again until on like WHCN. I heard I Love It Loud.
Yeah.
I was babysitting for like my neighbors, listening to their stereo. You know what I mean?
Right,
and I Love It Loud came out. I was like, wait, what is this? You know, and then that started it all again. Then it never stopped after that.
Same with me.
Yeah.
For me, it was 83 when the makeup came off. But yeah, the cover to Dynasty, I actually think that the poster on the inside when they're in the straitjackets would have been a better cover.
Yeah, it's a cool picture.
Like, that's a really cool picture.
Yeah.
Plus, it with them in the straitjackets, it gives you that
What they're doing.
they're crazy. These guys are rebels. These guys are, you know.
And plus, they were all torturing each other then, too. It was all like we said before. So it kind of was a sign of that, right?
Right. But so The Elder, I didn't hear it until I got back into Kiss in the mid-'80s. And I was mortified the first time I listened to it. I was like, well, no wonder they almost shit out here. Like, holy crap.
I think the first thing I remember hearing from that album was when they performed on Fridays.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, we bought a lot of bootlegs, and someone had the Friday show on there, and I loved it from the get-go. You know, especially seeing Ace play with Eric is like, this is magic to me. And I think it's like my favorite lineup, you know. And, you know, I love the album. It's strange. It doesn't fit with any other album from them. Like I said, you can hear, you know, touches of Gene's solo album there a little bit. Dark Light it does sound like an Ace song, but the lyrics are different, you know.
Right.
But The Oath, I love The Oath, but the lyrics are, you know, they're not typical Paul lyrics, you know.
Well, they were telling a story.
They're
Like
telling
every
a
song
story,
was
yeah.
supposed to tell this Lord of the Rings kind of story.
Yeah.
I do like a lot of the songs on the album, kind of, you know, as standalone songs when you put them on and say, you know, and again, because we're fans, that we are. And if you're a non-fan, then obviously I get that. You're not going to like this. But, you know, there's a few on there that,
Like the Odyssey.
yeah.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, and I don't want to hear, and I know we used to listen to this when we were younger, but I don't want to hear Just a Boy ever again either.
No.
Really?
You know, and I don't know what else is there, but besides that, I mean, I like, you know, I mean, the song, I mean, it's definitely takes way more shit than it's
Than it deserves.
than it's justified to get, and it's because it's Kiss. That's why. If it was somebody else, it wouldn't be that.
And I think it's when the album was dropped.
Yes. It's because you were talking about a rock band who just tried to convince you that blowing up the world and playing songs about their dicks and having sex with girls was all that mattered. And then a few years later, you're trying to tell me that this is what's important now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this story and this stuff? What, are you kidding me? I mean, yeah. I mean, people saw right through it. I mean, I don't blame them.
Yeah. At that point, I think Kiss was, you know, they were being buried alive. People were throwing the dirt on them after The Elder came out. And, you know, as we know, too, Ace was really, he had just about had it. He recorded.
1 foot out the door?
Yeah, he recorded The Elder here in Connecticut in his
Right.
house.
Right.
He didn't even bother to go up to Canada with
Right.
the rest of them. So, you know, here's poor Eric Carr.
Right. What
He-
the hell,
He
right?
gets the dream job, right? He gets to replace Peter Criss in Kiss, the biggest band in the world. And now he comes into drama. Ace Frehley won't come and record. They put out at the time, the worst album ever. It was. I'm surprised they survived. Like you said, it's a testament to their determination to survive that.
I remember. I don't know what book it was or where I read it, but Ace was living near us here, really close.
Sharon. Yeah.
And
they started doing demos there, I think.
yeah, but I remember when Ace wanted out of the band, like Paul. There's a story about Paul going up to Litchfield or to Connecticut,
Yep.
and them going out, like shopping, for lunch and stuff, and Paul trying to convince him to
That's
stay
in
in the
Ace's
band.
book.
And and Ace still didn't stay in the band.
Yeah.
I have a funny side story about that whole thing. So it was in Sharon, Connecticut, just outside of Wilton. And Paul Harriet, our friend Paul Harriet, and on the show, recorded his first album in Ace's house in 1988.
Really?
Yeah, Songs for the Shower. And I didn't know Paul at the time, but I was working with the bass player in the band, Mike. And he came up and said to me, hey, you're a Kiss fan. We're recording in Ace Frehley's house and this and that. I said, oh. He's like, we're doing a song called Your Boyfriend's an Asshole. And we have the Asshole Choir. You should come down and be part of the Asshole Choir.
Be
And
one
I
of
was
the
like,
assholes.
they're a punk band. I was like, oh, okay. I'll think about it. That afternoon, Paul came driving up the driveway at the factory building. And he was driving a powder blue Cadillac convertible at the time with their band logos on the doors. And he was driving the car standing up. And he's yelling, hey, everybody, how's it going? And I went, yeah, that's creepy. I'm not going. I was a teenager. It kind of freaked me out.
Yeah.
And I told my girlfriend, and she was like, yeah, let's not go. Well, big mistake, because,
It was Ace Frehley's.
it was legit. They weren't weirdos who were going to, carve me into pieces and eat me. But what's funny is Paul has showed me some videos of that recording session, and Paul's in the bathroom, Ace's bathroom, and there's XLR mic inputs next to the toilet. And, Paul's like, why would he have these in here? And then I read Ace's book, and he talks about how much he learned from Eddie Kramer about using acoustics in different areas. And he goes, he even put mic jacks in my bathroom because of all the marble in there.
Yeah.
And I started laughing because I was like, holy shit, yeah.
Everything sounds better in the bathroom.
It came full circle for me when I read Ace's book that, I always wondered why there were mic jacks next to the toilet, and now I know why, because Eddie Kramer put them there.
Right.
I wish I went. I'm kicking myself now for not going down there.
Yeah.
So now we get to the end here. Creatures of the Night. This is the end of our Volume 1 Kiss special. So Ace is on the cover, but he was out.
Yeah.
One of Connecticut's own gets brought in, Vinnie Cusano. And they put out probably, if not the best Kiss album, one of the top 3 of all time. And it doesn't sell.
Yeah, no, right. I agree that it's definitely one of the best albums that they put out. It's the best cover. The album sounds great. Most of the songs are really good songs. But after The Elder, there was just no audience. Because people just, like you said before, they're done.
They didn't even tour in support of The Elder.
Right. Right. And
that Friday show is the only live performance they ever did.
And they didn't tour in the United States for Unmasked either. I mean, they played one show, and then they went to Australia.
Solid Gold.
Right.
And they did something in
They were doing
Europe.
variety shows.
Yeah, they lip-synced in some shows in Europe.
Yeah.
Right.
So they were pretty much off the radar. And I remember, again, walking into Record Town at the mall and seeing that cover and going, they're still around, these guys? But what are your impressions of Creatures of the Night, Mike?
I love the album. I love all the Paul songs. Actually, I love all the songs. I do like all the songs. It's a good album. Lick It Up is. I look at those two as their brother sister albums.
So do I. Yeah.
And the songs on both those albums I think could appear on either one. I think that Creatures has some better songs, but overall, the quality might not be as high as the next album. Overall, I think it's a good debate, those two albums. Maybe we could do that next time. That Creatures has I Love a Loud, War Machine, huge. But then the other album, I look it up, I feel like maybe more straight through maybe is a better quality.
More consistent album. Yeah.
But not without those huge highs. But yeah, Creatures is awesome. Give me a break. The title track rules. The look was awesome. Eric Carr's drum sound, the cover, everything about it was great. And it's perfect early 80s. It's like exactly what was happening then and the world wanted and needed. And that's part of how they came back, is that they were playing, heavy, no BS type rock music, because in the early 80s, before all the hair metal and all that stuff happened, that's really how the hard rock and the metal was. It was unapologetic and no frills until we got to the mid 80s, and then it got
the MTV. I think MTV is the one that influenced look over substance, and that's everybody started chasing the glam. And to your point,
the girls and the power ballads and all that crap.
Right. Up till 1982, 83, it was very raw with Judas Priest.
It was for men.
Yeah.
It was for men to listen to, really. I mean,
You
it
listen
really
to
was.
those first couple Motley albums, they're just raw. The
Yeah.
Rat albums are raw.
Right.
Yeah.
And same
then they
thing-
became overproduced.
Yeah, and all the same thing happened with the clothes and the look and the makeup, and then the songs, softer keyboards, ballads. I want to be on MTV. I want to have girls lined up. I want to make tons of money. I mean, and that changed everything.
Right. George, what's your impression of Creatures?
Oh, it's a great album. I love it. Keep Me Coming. Very underrated Kiss song. Rock and Roll Hell.
I
Great
love Rock and
song.
Roll Hell, yeah.
I don't know why these songs are in the
I know.
playlist. And I Still Love You is a great ballad.
Yeah.
You know.
War Machine to me, and when they play it live now, it makes me want to, as Mike used to famously say, I want to take a brick and smash my face. I love War Machine.
The best memory I have of War Machine is Beavis and Butthead.
Right.
Do you remember that when
Yes.
they're wearing their AC/DC and Metallica
Metallica.
shirts, and they're going to sign up for the army? So they're at a recruiting center, and they're out in the front of it. And it just cuts right to that, and they're in front going, "I'm a war machine." They're singing it and doing it all. It was awesome. I got to find that clip. I'll send it to you guys. But hilarious, hilarious.
That was great.
God.
All right, well, that's a pretty good first run, taking care of that first era of Kiss. But before we go, and this is completely off the top of your heads, top 5 Kiss songs from 5 to 1 from that era. Who wants to go first?
I'll go as quickly as I can. So from that era, Jesus, well, that's a lot of era though. I mean, the first album, Deuce is definitely a top Kiss song for me. I Stole Your Love. I would say those two are at the top of the list. Creatures of the Night. I mean, if we're talking this era, I think that would go in there. Then you go back to the first few albums, and it's hard for me because I love all those songs so much.
I know.
Watching You is the best.
Strange
100,000
Ways,
Years.
yeah.
And She. It's hard. It is hard.
It's impossible.
It is really impossible.
Yeah.
But I would say those 3 songs I mentioned are really kind of big ones for me.
You gotta say Got to Choose, Black Diamond.
Yeah, Black Diamond.
Love
Yeah.
Her All I Can, Detroit Rock City.
There's a million of them. Making Love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't pick anyone off Unmasked.
That's shocking. Yeah, for me, it would be definitely War Machine, Love Gun, I Stole Your Love, Detroit Rock City, and Deuce
Yeah.
probably. Or
Yeah.
Black Diamond. Jesus.
I mean,
Yeah,
those.
It's hard.
I mean, those are awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about I Stole Your Love and Deuce and Creatures of the Night for me, those 3 songs through the years were awesome concert openers.
Yes.
And so I think that's why I have a lot of love for those 3 songs.
Yeah.
Because they would start the show and it was just the
Remember
best.
the Hot in the Shade tour, they started with I Stole Your Love.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they would go I Stole Your Love right to Deuce with no break.
Right.
And then it was just forget about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think our
It
heads
was
were
awesome.
exploded. Our
Yeah.
blood was pouring out of our ears.
Yeah, that was the best.
I think one of the best shows I've ever seen.
That when we
Across
all
the
went
board.
to Springfield to see that
Yeah.
Hot in the Shade tour.
Yeah.
That was great.
It was a perfect blend of the non-makeup stuff with the old stuff. To hear they hadn't played much old stuff to that point in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They brought it back.
It's awesome. Any final thoughts?
I can't wait to do the next one.
Yeah, no,
actually.
yeah,
It was
this-
pretty effortlessly. I feel like we could do another hour in the first
We could.
first 8 years.
Yeah, definitely. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to doing it again. Definitely.
Awesome. So with that, we will wrap up this special edition of Pizza Pop Culture. For George and Mike, I would be Keith Shitty Chicken. Remember to listen to our friends at Pina Comics, Ghost of the Stratosphere, 430 Movie, and Glorious Trexperts, Best Movies Never Made in Forgotten Cinema. And follow us on all our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Insta, at Pizza Pop Culture. And our website is pizzapopculture.com. We will be back with part 2 of our Kiss special edition, the non-makeup years. And I know we'll probably go longer than this on that one. So until then, do you believe in rock and roll, fellas?
We do.
Of course.
I want to know how many people here tonight believe in rock and roll!
They killed the giggler, man. They killed the giggler! They had no business doing that. None.
I'm funny how? I mean funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you, and make you laugh. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny? Funny how? I mean funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you.
If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up below. Also, please subscribe to GeekTime TV. It really helps us grow the channel. And make sure you hit that bell icon in order to receive notifications every time we drop new content here. You can also check us out on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at GeekTimeNet. Thanks again for watching. We will see you soon.
Say, kids, what time is that?